Today's Know the Cause is really dedicated to women. Why? We're going to talk about breast cancer, which foods feed it, and which seem to starve it, okay? We'll talk about that. Then Dr. Julia Schulenberg is here. She's a registered nurse and a naturopathic doctor, and she begs the question that I do every day. What's the cause? You need to know the cause, and she introduces something I love called stinkin' thinkin'. You're gonna love seeing Dr. Schulenberg here today. Toxic shock syndrome, nasal sinusitis, what's the cause? And then rethinking medical conclusions. The conclusion of the report said this, but what was really the etiology or the cause? All that and more on this, Know the Cause.
For the past 45 years, I have dedicated my life and my whole career to finding the root cause of disease. And I now know with certainty that we must play a role in our own health care. I'm a self-care advocate. You know what? Every time you change your diet for the better, exercise, or swallow a nutritional supplement, so are you. Now welcome to Know the Cause.
Maybe 10, 12 years ago, an amazing thing happened. I was writing kind of my hypotheses. I wrote a book on the germ that causes cancer. And in this, a glorious thing happened. While I was working on that book, a paper pops up and it says, you know, alcohol may increase the risk of breast cancer. Wow, alcohol is a mycotoxin, brewer's yeast. And I thought, that's relevant. I put it in the book. What increases a woman's risk of breast cancer? We can throw money at Race for a Cure. We can do, we can get 50 people out and jog together. I think that's all good. But unless we get to the root cause, where money is going for these events is paying drug companies to invent new drugs. These organizations, like the American Medical Association, the American Pharmaceutical Association, think the answer is really going to come from another prescription. I don't think so. I have some proof. Let's read it, okay? Breast cancer, which foods help reduce my risk and which foods increase the risk? Now, let me just tell you something. At the top that said breast cancer. I could take the breast away, fill in the word. Brain, prostate, testicular, bone, blood, leukemia, fill in the word. Because your doctor believes there are hundreds of different kinds of cancer. Listen to your doctor, don't listen to me. I think often fungus is the cause. I think often these are tummy problems, gut problems that proliferate into larger problems. Fungi live in a sac. And so you're in the shower in the morning and you go, whoa, what's that lump under my arm? I better get to a doctor. A doctor doesn't know ascomycetes or mycetomas. These are fungal sacs. They don't know. Everything looks like a cancer. When all you own is a hammer, then the whole world is a nail. Okay, here we go. Let's get started. We talk about which foods reduce and which foods increase. American Cancer Society finds that dietary fiber reduces breast cancer risk. This just came out the other day. I was so excited to see this. And it's a little technical. I'll zoom through it. A random effects meta-analysis of prospectional observational studies demonstrated that high total fiber consumption, this part you and I understand, high total fiber consumption was associated with reduced risk of breast cancer. Okay. Bingo. What's fiber? That would be my next question, okay? When I think of fiber, I think of bread. You know, Mom always used to put peanut butter and jelly and hand it to you and say, come on, you get your fiber and you get all that protein from peanuts and so forth. What is dietary fiber? Well, WebMD says this, and I like this. Dietary fiber refers to the edible part of a plant, or sugars, carbohydrates, that cannot be digested. So what goes in must come out. Fiber is in all plant foods, including fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, seeds, and beans or legumes. You can also find a form of fiber called chitin inside the shells of crustaceans, shrimp, crab, lobster, etc. It's kind of interesting. Well, then it became my job to kind of educate you, okay, but we don't eat bread. We don't eat some of these foods. Beans is on the Kaufman 2 diet, but not on the Kaufman 1 diet. So I did this. High fiber Kaufman friendly foods, okay? Raspberries, apples with skin, strawberries, boiled broccoli, turnip greens, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, carrots, quinoa, almonds, chia seeds, and then on the Kaufman 2, we have oatmeal and legumes, peas, beans, and so forth. The one thing I wish I could do is impose into every oncologist's brain that you need to take a careful dietary history when a patient comes to you with cancer. And you need to talk about gut. And you need to talk about when this lump started, okay? Folks, drugs, for example, antibiotics, can induce 5 common types of cancer. Not the first antibiotic, not 4 rounds. Lots of antibiotics increases the risk of cancer. These graphics that I'm going to show you next, this next graphic, is the compilation of about 4 years of work. Over a 4-year time period in the early 2000s, the scientific literature was telling us what increases your risk. You just heard what decreases your risk of cancer. Okay, breast cancer. But now I want to tell you, and you'll fully understand this. If you're a student of mine, you understand that certain fungi, about 300 of them, make poisons that off-gas inside our body, and several of these poisons are now linked to human cancer, okay? So mycotoxins are the bad guys when it comes to the induction of cancer. Well documented. Doctors, unfortunately, don't know this, but here we go. These increase the risk of breast cancer. And I've got to tell you, it's not just breast cancer, but definitely breast cancer. When I give this presentation to doctors, I have all the scientific references down, and it would boggle your mind. It's major medical journals. Alcohol increases the risk of breast cancer, and by the by, what I didn't put here, the type of alcohol didn't matter. Glass of wine, scotch, beer, etc. Alcohol increases the risk of breast cancer. Antibiotics increase the risk of breast cancer. A high carb, high starch bread, etc. diet increases the risk of breast cancer. When you filter all those out, our grain supply has mycotoxins in it, and alcohol and antibiotics are mycotoxins. Now we're starting to understand that. I have a guest you're going to love today, Dr. Julia Schulenberg. Many people in Dallas go see her. She's busy because she does things differently. And I learned during, when we were back there getting makeup on and so forth, it's one thing to work physically with a person. It's a whole other thing to figure out the etiology, the cause of their problem as maybe something deeper than my achy wrists or my tear duct problem or my migraine. Can you go into that? I mean, you see a lot of women. Mm-hmm. And what do you find causes so many of the complaints? I know you said in a previous show, fungus is seen in a lot of them. But is there a mental block in men and women as to the real cause of our problem?
Yes, there is. Now, sometimes I only need to address the physical problem. But then other times I need to go deeper. So because the physical body is a responder, it responds to the state of your soul. That's your thinking and your feelings, your emotions. Well, your soul responds to the state of your belief system. Okay, so that's how you believe in regarding God or your spiritual life. It's right believing, okay? So back to the soul, though, if you have negative thinking, negative thoughts, or I've heard before referred to as stinking thinking, then it can cause fear in the emotions, it can cause sadness, it can cause brokenheartedness, it can cause any of those negative emotions. Well, those negative emotions will trigger a neurological response. It can hinder even good neurotransmitters in the brain, such as dopamine and serotonin or oxytocin. Those are the feel-good hormones. And then it can also trigger a stress trigger such with the sympathetic nervous system. So when the sympathetic nervous system, that's your fight-flight response, when that is triggered, then it will trigger an irritability to the enteric nervous system. That's your digestive system. And then it can also hinder the production of hydrochloric acid, which is also for the digestive system, and then it'll hinder the production of enzymes from the pancreas, and then also insulin, which is all a part of that metabolic system.
I mean, do you sit down and talk to
All of this is just coming from that emotional stress.
As an RN in the old days, your boss would have written a prescription. Here's an
Right.
SSRI. You just got stressed. But you're finding with so many women, especially I'm sure men too,
Yes.
that it's deeper than that. So you become part-time counselor and part-time. Julia, by the way,
do.
is a friend of ours. She is a naturopathic physician. So you have to go deeper than, oh, you've got carpal tunnel. In many cases, you're blocking healing from happening.
Yes, and I can relate to a lot of women because women, a lot of times, can see that they come in with lower self-worth, and they are such emotional creatures that they are thinking about their emotions and thinking about how they feel. They feel this way about themselves or feel that way about themselves, and all they need to do is, I just want to change their focus from themselves and their feelings to Jesus. What did Jesus say about you? What did Jesus do for you? What's he going to do in you? It's all of promise. And then, so they're not massaging and focusing on their feelings and their emotions, but they're really just then set their focus on what God said, his promise. You know, everything's working out for your good. You don't need your husband or a man or some significant other, or you don't need this or that to feed your emotions. What you need is the truth. You need to know that God loves you and how much he loves you, and your value is in that, and your value isn't in performance. Your value is in serving, and that's really just refocusing and redirecting their thoughts.
I just met you today. Now I see why you're so popular. I mean, you go pretty deep with people. A physician isn't going to go that deep, and if he does, he'll hand you a prescription for an antidepressant. Will you treat these people also with herbs? Will you help their problems?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that's my first go-to is to see if they can do this herb or this supplement. And if I know that that's not going to cut it, then I wait for an open door and see where I can kind of slip in or get in, and I have the opportunity then to go deeper.
Yeah, she's very well respected out here. She's been here a long time. Thank you for all the work. On behalf of all your patients that I get to know also, thank you for the work you do. She used to be a registered nurse. Now she's a naturopathic doctor. What a story that alone is. You saw the website, holistichealingjs.com. Salute.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
So Kay asked the question, how hard is it to get rid of fungus that's harboring in the nasal passages? It's not so rare. As a matter of fact, a 1999 Mayo Clinic study found that about 90-95% of chronic sinusitis, ethmoid, sphenoid sinuses, feeling miserable, you can't breathe at night, etc., is caused by fungus, and yet 100% of doctors today prescribe antibiotics. Antibiotics can fuel fungal infections, so I caution doctors to be very careful. Get a differential diagnosis. Make sure that isn't fungus before you use an antibiotic. And folks, what we can do, Kay and everyone, what we can do to remain more proactive is to rotate inhalers, antifungal sprays you can get in a health food store, olive leaf extract, and there's so many of them. There's oregano. I have 3 or 4 of them at home because this is a problem I used to have. And one night I might use one, and another night I might use another one. Rotate them, you know, a couple shots in each nostril. And then most importantly, no matter where the fungus is living in your body, in your sinuses or in your intestines, starve it. Watch what diet does. When you stay away from alcohol and sweets and grains for a week or two, watch how you're able to go to bed and breathe perfectly well without those sprays. Fungus has a lot to do with chronic sinusitis.
As many of you folks know, I worked with a lot of doctors, and I addressed something they didn't learn in their medical training. This is back in my 20s, 30s, and 40s. About 22, 23 years total, I worked clinically with doctors. One day at one of the big hospitals here in Dallas, a woman came in and we were taking her medical history. The doctor asked her about her family, and she said, my daughter just died 2 months ago of something called TSS. Again, an acronym. Why is it everybody in medicine uses acronyms? toxic shock syndrome. It's a tampon disorder, right? But it's not exclusive to tampons, right? Men, children, can die of TSS also, as I'll explain. And I got to thinking, folks, I look at every illness as though it has a fungal etiology, a fungal cause. Could it have? And through my career of spanning, 50 years, I tend to turn up leads that fascinate me. Doctors will totally disagree that there's any fungal component to toxic shock syndrome. But I've got you captive. Take 5 minutes and go over this with me. Okay, so toxic shock syndrome. What might cause this tragic disorder? And in fact, it's tragic. She was telling me, I don't know how she lived through it. I don't know how she lived through it. And her daughter didn't. I mean, this is a horrible, horrible disease. Okay, let's keep going. I didn't expound on that part of it. Menstrual toxic shock syndrome emerged as a public health threat to women of reproductive age in 1979 and 1980. And this article says, this comes out of the Center for Disease Control. We reviewed surveillance data for the period of 79 to 96, when 5,300 cases were reported, and discussed changes in the epidemiological features of toxic shock syndrome. Can you even imagine? Go forward with me. That was, almost 25 years ago. How many young women have died of this disease without knowing the cause? And here's what the medical community says. Toxic shock syndrome is a rare, life-threatening complication of certain types of, really, everything in medicine is bacterial. Everything, okay? Of bacterial infections. Often toxic shock syndrome results from toxins produced by Staphylococcus aureus staph bacteria. But the condition may also be caused by toxins produced by group A streptococcus strep bacteria. Staph, strep, bacteria. When you graduate from medical school and all you own is a hammer, then the whole world looks like a nail to you. Doctors have learned this much about antibiotics because there's hundreds of them they sell, okay? And they need to learn all the bacterial epidemiology or etiology of all these conditions. Everything looks like a bacteria. If I went through medical school, I'd be the wrong guy to be hosting this show, because I'd be telling you about exciting new antibiotics that, and you'd be, oh, great, we're watching that guy again. This is different. Just go with me here. So look at underneath that. Toxic shock syndrome can affect anyone, including men, children, and postmenopausal women, so it's not just a tampon disease. Risk factors for toxic shock syndrome include skin wounds and surgery. Okay, here's where I kind of jumped the shark. Okay, here's where my brain, I always thought of that woman and her daughter, and it broke my heart listening to her story. This is a tough disease. And then a few years ago, my eyes were opened. My next graphic. The three major genera, species of mycotoxin-producing fungi are Aspergillus, Fusarium, and Penicillium. I've talked with you about that often. Each is a sac-forming fungi called an ascomycete. A lump can develop. The major U.S. crops affected are corn, I've told you that, peanuts, wait a minute, cotton? Cotton? I mean, cotton? We don't eat cotton, so it isn't a cotton seed we've talked about. Cottonseed oil off the Kaufman 1 diet, right? Cotton? Tampon? I'm starting to put things together. This is an extremely rare condition. And so would it be that a tampon maker who doesn't know about fungus has a tampon, a cotton insert, that's loaded with fungus. Go with me here. Might fungal poisons, mycotoxins, cause toxic shock? Now that's kind of tiny, but let me read it to you. A Texas woman found an unexpected substance growing on an unused tampon, mold. She noticed the black spots after she accidentally popped the product out of its applicator, in March 2012. Although the offending mold was never publicized, one Egyptian study found that 87% of cottonseed is impregnated with Aspergillus fungi, which makes the carcinogenic product, mycotoxin, called aflatoxin B1. Are these young women who are dying of toxic shock syndrome being poisoned by a mycotoxin? It's funny, Egyptian doctors know this. American doctors, and I don't know, go back to that graphic, Cray. I don't know, this applicator, you women know this. I don't know if you can open that thing and pop the cotton out first and make sure it doesn't look like that. This is an unused tampon. Look at the mold growing on it. I mean, I don't know the answer to that. Be careful out there. Medicine doesn't know about mold growing on tampons, but it does grow pretty commonly on cotton. Just think that way. I'm glad you now know that, okay? You know, I want to do a segment on rethinking medical conclusions. As a matter of fact, I title it that, Rethinking Medical Conclusions. Folks, one of the most interesting to me is watching an ad on TV where an actor who has a stethoscope around his neck, a doctor, is saying, you know, gout is a serious condition. Gout is caused by too much uric acid in the bloodstream. Okay, the genius is not the guy who develops a new antifungal drug to treat gout, but who understands what causes the uric acid. We'll do segments on that. I think this is brewer's yeast causes uric acid, by the way, beer. Okay, let's talk about rethinking medical conclusions. Okay, autoimmunity and infections. When the body fights itself, this was a Swiss study in 2017, and read its, one of the sentences here. Doctors are on the trail of a possible connection between autoimmune diseases and infections. Errors can occur when immune cells absorb certain proteins from pathogenic cells. Fungus is a pathogenic cell. But I think this is so fascinating, folks, because what the medical community believes, those infections, we give them antibiotics for them and they never get better. Look, the body goes on to develop autoimmune diseases. Gosh, our pills work to take the fever down and stop the bacteria, but we must not have killed it all. It must stay in their body a little bit. Wrong conclusion. Infections cause autoimmune diseases. Right conclusion. The antibiotics, doctor, that you treated their infections with are fungal mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are fully capable of inducing or causing immune system damage and autoimmune diseases like cancer. You see where my brain's going there? Doctors believe, man, you've had a bunch of infections, so you're a sitting duck for an autoimmune disease like cancer, arthritis, etc. No, you're not. It's the antibiotic that weakens your immune system that then 7 years later, as you drink beer and drink wine and, you know, eat a lot of bread and eat a lot of pasta and so forth, goes on to have that doctor scratch, man, you got lupus. It must be those infections you had when you were young. You know where I go with that, okay? Next one. I love this one. Statin cholesterol drugs. They are the darlings of Wall Street that hormone replacement drugs were only a few decades ago. 47% reduction in colon cancer with statin drugs. I mean, these are real findings. You got to give it to them. Statins may hold key to stopping multiple sclerosis. Are statins a breakthrough against Alzheimer's? Stopping osteoarthritis with statins. And I could have made 12 more graphics. Folks, when they first came out, they were the darlings of Wall Street. We found that doctors were willing to prescribe drugs to healthy people. And then a few years later, tell those healthy people, these drugs are saving your life. I mean, your cholesterol is 210. By the way, mine's 228. I just had it tested, and there's no way in the world I would take a statin drug. I'm concerned about them, okay? But here you see the darlings of Wall Street. Man, they're helping. Why? Here's my question. Why is it that statin drugs seem to be working for so many health problems? Go with me here. A lot of you know this, if you've been watching Know the Cause for a long period of time. Statin drugs, of course, kill fungus. Here's from Medical Mycology 12 years ago. Antifungal activity of statins against Aspergillus. Here's out of Fungal Bionics. Statin drugs were initially developed as antifungal agents, which just happened to have an effect in lowering blood fat levels. Boy, that's a huge statement. And then here out of the world of clinical infectious disease, statins were observed to have unexpected antifungal effects, and their potential application in the treatment of fungal diseases has been intensively studied. That's interesting. All of a sudden, they're the darlings of Wall Street, and they do lower blood lipids. Is that good? I don't know. I can't answer that. I have my own feelings on that, but Why do they work? Gee, they just happen to kill fungus. Look at this last graphic. Wrong conclusion. Statin drugs are saving lives by preventing so many diseases. Give them more statin drugs. Give your patients more statin drugs. Here, in my opinion, is the right conclusion. Statin drugs kill fungus. So fungus is the likely cause of not only elevated blood fats, but also a number of health disorders that statin drugs help. If you don't know fungus, I don't think you really know the etiology of high cholesterol or disease, okay? Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Schulenberg. Thank you so much for being with us also. Man, just an amazing woman. I love interviewing her. Please don't take the whole concept of this show the wrong way. This show does not say stop going to a doctor. This show says arm yourself with knowledge before you sit down with a doctor. God bless you. See you next time.